Yeah, for sure. Well, it's great. It's great to connect with you. And I want to begin our conversation with 4 years ago. We were really trying to figure out how this pandemic was going to play out. And at this point now, we're kind of in this post pandemic era of our lives. How did you
Mhm.
make it through that time period and how did it change you?
Well, actually, it was an interesting time. As you probably know, I work with law enforcement. I'm a police therapist, and we have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. We have 13 facilities in by state, and World Trade Centers were one of our buildings, where they were our buildings. And once the pandemic hit, nobody was traveling,
Yeah.
and so the 13 facilities were pretty much shut down. And we have all of these cops, 2,300 cops doing not a hell of a lot. And during that time, I also had to have open heart surgery as a result of dental work. I had a crown replaced, and the bacteria got into my bloodstream and destroyed my mitral valve and damaged the tricuspid. So I was in the hospital for 3 weeks during COVID with no visitors. And so that was an interesting experience. Um, but with regards to my own work, it got very quiet during that time. I don't think there was a lot going on. But what I did see and did experience was the impact it had on people on so many levels, whether it was their children. Just I know how it impacted me going to the store. You know, the masks, the whole, and I think it was really affecting me psychologically. I couldn't, because none of it made sense to me. It was just something that we're being told, but there's no real proof of anything.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time and a challenging time, and I still think that we may be still recovering from the effects of 9/11. I'm sorry, COVID,
Yeah.
and I I I, I don't know when we're going to come out of that. I know it changed me, the way I looked at life, and uh, I don't think I'm as happy as I was prior to COVID. I don't know, and maybe it's just a combination of everything,
Yeah.
and using COVID as a actual concrete example. I don't know, but I still think we're experiencing it though.
I do too. And I think that we're a long ways away. I think we're too close to it still to kind of
Yeah,
pull everything back and say, hey, now it's time to fetter through what happened and how we got through it and where we're at. But yeah, it definitely was because it wasn't like one thing was affected or two things. It was every single aspect of our lives.
everyone, no matter
Yeah.
what you did, travel, and then coming out of the heart surgery, I was at the cardiac rehab at the hospital, and they said, "You want to get the shot?" I had no interest getting the shot, to be honest with you. Every time I went online and filled out all this information, they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have it." I said, "You know what? The heck with it. I'm not going to bother." But being in the hospital doing the cardiac rehab every day, they asked me, "Did I want to get it?" I said, "Well," and I even asked the cardiologist, and I changed cardiologists after this. I said, "What do you think about me getting the COVID shot?" Uh, he goes, "Well, I don't think it'll be a problem." I said, "You don't think?" I said, That's not what I want to hear from the cardiologist,
Yeah.
right?" So I went ahead and got it. And if you ask me today if I would do it, I would say no. There are too many unknown variables associated with the shot. But at that time, I figured let me err on the side of caution. You know,
Yeah.
I just got out of the hospital, so that's what I did. And but I'm right there with you on. I think it's still impacting us,
Yeah.
and it's going to be long term. So
Yeah, for sure. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do here in 2024 on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
well, I look at them. I tell them I work with law enforcement, with the officers themselves, dealing with stress in their lives. And as we know today, law enforcement is having a challenging time with the public and the community. It's the pendulum's going to swing back at some point, but right now they're still struggling with the community perspective and how they're viewed. The turning point was really George Floyd, and during that time, and as everyone in the country saw, the civil unrest throughout the country as a result of that. Um, for I think it's important for third graders, to use that example, that they understand that law enforcement, they're there to uh, keep peace and justice in our communities. And yes, I'm not going to say 100% that officers are, perfect or good people. There are some people who shouldn't be police officers, but their job is very challenging today. And part of the reason is everybody has a cell phone. And no matter where you go, when you see some sort of public disruption, all you see are people holding up their phones, taking pictures and of the cops. So when I teach in the academy, I tell them, you know, be mindful that everything you do is being recorded.
Yep.
And, you know, putting yourselves, I wouldn't say this to the kids, but when you put yourself in front of a situation where you have to think instantaneously and make a decision, that decision can determine the course of your life from that point forward. You can leave and go out and do your tour that day, and next thing you know, you're in the newspapers, you're in court. There's possibility that you will go to jail. You will lose everything that you've worked hard for, and that's the challenge today of law enforcement taking that job. And I don't know how it is in Missouri, but I think right now to get people to take that job is a challenge because it can just change your life in a very radical way. And I see how law enforcement has evolved. I've been with the Port Authority now 35 years in the unions, and I had been a cop with them prior to that. But it's certainly many aspects have changed. Some things have really stayed the same, but most of the work that I see today is uh, far more technical and professional than it was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes, and it
yeah,
is mind-blowing to think how many good things are done on a daily basis in every law enforcement precinct
right.
around the world, and how these small little things. And I think you probably you're as close and well learned on all of these matters. I think you know at the core what the issue is, but how do we get rid of that? I think there's a level of people that find the history of racism, especially in this country, to be kind of the problem. But I think overall, I think there's a lot of great work that's being done. And you see some of that sometimes. Cops playing basketball with kids in the inner city and other
Right.
things that are good PR pieces. But I think overall, I think there's a mentality in America now with this cancel culture thing. I think people really it's an unfortunate momentum that's going into the mentality of people in this country to wanna, like, watch that happen. It's strange.
It's mind-boggling in that I often say to friends, said, "What is the future for the kids today?
Yeah,
Where's this all going?"
I
And
know.
I don't fully understand the whole concept of it, I and then I shut down. I don't want to think about it
Yep.
because it's too much for me to figure out. But I look at it even in the academies when I teach. One of the books that I wrote with Operation Longevity is the 21-day call to action coin challenge. And law enforcement, military, they love the challenge coins. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they love them. And I put this one book together, and the core piece of that book is every day that individual has to do a random act of kindness and write it down in the book. And I give them 40 examples so they don't have to think too hard. And they're simple tasks, they're not difficult. And to write them down in the book. And then there's some other things each day, but very simple. When I did it with the academy, with my focus group, they loved the random acts of kindness, loved doing them. And they were quite creative, I have to say, when they did them. And the purpose in that is that if they do 12 to 15 days random act of kindness without recognition, and that's important, to do that, the chemistry in the brain begins to change, eliciting the positive hormones, oxytocin, dopamine. My theory is, it's not scientifically proven, but my theory is, and I think it's logical, there's a sequitur here that makes sense, that if you're feeling better about yourself, less likely are you to do harm to yourself. And the suicide rate in law enforcement is very high. So that's my thinking in that, and it's been well received and embraced uh, pretty easily, actually, talking about the book. And that's what I hope to do, is to continue to educate law enforcement, not even law enforcement. That book can be translated over to the general
Mhm.
population. And we're in such a desperate way today to feel better about yourself. If I asked you, what do you want out of life? What is it that you want? Typically, people will say, I want to be happy.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you go about that? And by doing, when you read anything about people who are multimillionaires, they have everything that they possibly want, but there's an emptiness within themselves. And so, how do you attain this happiness? And I tell people that that sustainable happiness comes from within, and it's the by way of doing random acts of kindness and helping humankind. That's what changes your perspective.
Yeah, I agree. So when you were in the 3rd grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Uh, I was not a good student. It's shocking that I got as far as I did in my educational stuff, but um, I probably, well, one of the things, I had been a cop, but I was a Franciscan friar for 9 years, and I think I always had a proclivity to do stuff like that. To be, um, I grew up Catholic, in a Catholic family, but I always had a an attraction to that. So that's how I went there. And people say, you have such an interesting background. It's a little crazy, but all of the pieces fit into the work that I do now. I have the degree in theology, psychology, and I've integrated them all. So to answer that question is, really, I never wanted to be a cop. That was never. My father was, my grandfather was, my brother was as well, one of my brothers, and I was not really called to do that. So I left, and that's when I went to the Friars, and I loved it. I loved the work, and so I still use it on some level.
So when I was a kid, I was watching Chips and I wanted to be with Poncho on the California highway.
Yeah.
Then when I got older, I saw Cops on Fox and thought, well, if that's what this is really all about, I don't think that's the route that I want to go down.
Yeah,
It's,
and that's pretty right on in
yeah.
the cop scene, and if and some people love it, love it.
Yeah.
I did not particularly like it, so I knew it wasn't for me early on, and yeah, because Hollywood can do a beautiful thing with law enforcement, but
Yes, they can.
yeah, so that's where I probably evolved to, in my life.
Yeah. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration in your life?
That's a great question. Uh, I I guess somebody, it goes along with what I do, like people like Francis of Assisi, Mother Teresa, um, uh, and people in the medical field, that my doctor, who's no longer with us, but he was such a wonderful, compassionate man, and I think I have a tendency to lean more towards the person who is compassionate rather than successful or world renowned, I guess, but and people who just are live a life of more humility and humbleness. So, and that's how my doctor was too. So,
So let me ask you this. If you could meet anybody on the planet that's alive right now that you find fascinating, who would you love to meet and talk to?
um,
Or we could even open it up to the ghosts. We could do the other side.
well, and I did meet him, but would have loved to have sat down and talked with him. I was a big John Denver fan,
Okay.
and even his music today, I listen to. It calms me. People aren't familiar with the collection of music he did, but I just love the way he drew on nature and on life,
Yeah.
and the simplicity of it, and the orchestrations are just magnificent, and the simplicity of it. Unfortunately, he died very young, but he was somebody that I did meet him up at when he flew his plane into Teterboro at the time. Um, but I would have loved to have sat down and talked with him further,
Yeah.
and see his perspective on things. And I guess I'm drawn to more of that type of person that um, wants to see the world to be a better place, uh, and I try to each day I go out to the bay here. I keep a gratitude journal, and I always pray for humility and to be less judgmental, which is a real character flaw on my part, but I'm working on it. And patience, because we're challenged today in a very desperate way to be a little bit more humble and caring for the world, really.
Yeah, that's one of my wife's favorite musicians of all time. She just melts when she hears John Denver. And for some reason in my history, I love music. I always remember him on the Muppet Show.
Yeah,
That was an iconic moment for John Denver in my mind. And they loved him. He had every character around him. They were flipping out, you know? So,
and he enjoyed it.
yeah, he loved
He
it.
enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I tell your wife I'm right there with her.
Yep.
So I but yeah, it's an interesting question, and I don't. I guess maybe I don't aspire to. I don't have this desire to meet. You
Yeah.
know, it's just if somebody stands out, I say they'd be an interesting person to talk with
Uh-huh.
and to see what their ideas are and their perspective. But I definitely, unfortunately, the world is filled with many charlatans and people who do things for the wrong reasons,
Hmm.
and they're out there promoting themselves under the auspices they're doing the world all of this good, and then you find out that they're not as purely driven as you thought they were. And so I don't I guess I don't aspire to have that desire, but I'll come across people who I'd want to,
Yeah.
sit down with. But
For sure. So, in your work, for all these years that you've done this, you walk into heavy stuff. You're not dealing with just a day job that you go into. You're dealing with people that have heavy issues that are going on. So my question to you is, what has been your daily motivation to wake up every day and to do this work, to help other people? And you also have to hold back and take care of yourself and evolve as a human being. What has been this gas in the tank for you?
I always loved work of helping others. That's always been sort of my draw, and that's when I feel most fulfilled, when I know I've made somebody else's life better for them. Um, to do the work, I been through burnout many times over my career with this stuff, and particularly post 9/11, I had very bad burnout and actually developed cancer from that. But I, um, I think for me, again, going back to I start each day out at the bay, and where is I'm so grateful for the quiet, that peace, and it's really peaceful out there, and you can take in nature and be grateful for and I believe me, I could drive out of the bay and get cut off by somebody, and that piece goes right out the window, and that's that. But that's what motivates me, and I say to make a difference in someone's life today. If I can do that, I feel as though I've been successful. And I there are times now in my life the counseling isn't. I, I'm a fair counselor, therapist. I wouldn't say I'm the best, but I think it's just because I've been doing it for so long, and but now it's about educating people, doing the work that I do, the books on a more global level, and helping people find a better way to live that way.
Yeah.
Um, I'm still grateful that if people call and want to help out. I'm I think I'm very good at assessing a situation and triaging it. But as far as a week to week to week to week counseling, I don't have it in me anymore to do it like that.
Yeah. So what are you the proudest of all of these things that you've done and evolved into? You helped extensively on 9/11. You're on a daily basis working with law enforcement. What is it that you're the proudest of?
I think at the end of the day, I can honestly say that I did the very best I could, and I think I helped a lot of people in their lives and been there for them. And I think that's one of the things as far as my work, because unlike a surgeon or say a heart surgeon, they fix your heart. Well, you're so grateful to them, and oh, doctor, that's wonderful, and they get immediate feedback.
Yeah.
Where my type of work, you don't. You you're listening, you're guiding them, developing a plan, how they're going to do it. You may never hear from them again, so you don't know if you made an impact. Was that, and if I was doing it just for money, I would be so depressed by that. That the money, and that's why I don't like doing private practice. I hate putting a dollar value on helping people
Yeah.
with their lives who are struggling. So I think what I'm proudest about is over the years, two things. I'm proud of having been a Franciscan friar. I loved it. That I just loved that. And secondly, that I've done my work to the best of my ability, and I think I've helped people. At least the feedback I get from cops, that I've helped people throughout my life.
So did you ever watch the show Monk?
Yeah.
Okay. Did they had a movie that came out recently and it was during COVID and he was ecstatic because there was hand sanitizer everywhere and everybody had masks. It was like he was like, I've arrived in heaven. But I don't, which is so cool. I don't want to give anything too much away, but I bring this up in the vein of law enforcement and doing things that you never really see materialize. At one point in this movie, he gets really, really upset about, what am I doing here? What is how is this helping? And all of the ghosts of all of the clientele and victims that he solved came and told him what they did, and it completely settled into him. It finally made him see what he had been doing the whole time. And I think that's probably partially a narrative for police and law enforcement is that you are doing all of these strings of things and putting band-aids on things, but you never see the healed bone. You never see the flesh that actually got stitched and healed. You have to
Yeah.
do it in that moment, and you got to move on to the next fire. You don't
Right.
you don't like a doctor. And I find that very interesting with that line of work. And it was interesting to see on film how he did actually get validated finally. And I mean, that's not reality, that's Hollywood, but it's
But it is reality, though.
yeah,
That that is, and I don't know if I want that. I
right.
don't think I don't think I'd be mortified, to people telling me that, but it just you really had to be at peace with yourself and have a strong internal sense of self
Yeah.
to keep going through this whole thing. And I know if we have another attack of some sort, and there's likelihood that we will, given the way the United States is right now. But I don't think I can go through another something like
Oh,
9/11.
yeah.
We lost 37 cops that day, and I'm the only therapist for Port Authority. So losing that, and then the chaplain for the fire department, Father Michael Judge, who was number one on the coroner's list, who died that day. He was a Franciscan friar. We were in the same
Wow.
province, same order, and he was the first person I found out that died. Because by the time I got back to Jersey that night, uh, I was at the Lincoln Tunnel, went up to the captain's office, and Giuliani got on there, and he said, got on the TV and said, and we lost Father Michael Judge today. So he was the first person I found out that died that day.
Wow.
And so, you know, I just I don't want to go through, and nobody does.
Yeah.
I get that, but I can't, I don't have the stamina for it at this point in my life. Um, Let other people, younger people to do it. But um, yeah, I had to check that with mom
Yeah.
because he is, he's quite a character, but
Yeah.
uh, that's an existential question
That's
of
it.
what am I doing?
That was
What have
the
I done with
existential.
my life?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the existential crisis he came to. He was waiting for Godot, and that was
Yeah.
it that came in.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. You're doing all kinds of things. There's all these circles of people, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I, I I think I'm uh, a kind and attentive person. Uh, I care about people. I want to make a difference in the world and to make it better. I always said at the end of the day, I hope they remember me as being a gentleman. I made a difference in people's lives and that I cared for people.
Yeah.
Would that be a wonderful tribute?
Yeah.
Um, but uh, I think I've done some good and caring work for
Yeah.
people. It made a difference in their lives.
So if anyone out there wants to get your book, they want to learn more about what you're doing, reach out, any of the good business, where do they go?
OperationLongevity.org
Okay.
is the website. So very simple, and read a little bit about the work that I do. And I'm developing other things right now that are going to be easier for people to use in their lives and make it a better system for them. So,
Peter, this has been wonderful. I'm so glad that I was run into to so many wonderful human beings that are on the planet, and the work you're doing is magnanimous. And thank you, and keep doing the great work,
pleasure.
man.
Thank you. And your questions were very probing. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you very
absolutely.
much.
Yes,
All right.
sir.